I'd like you to imagine your dream life. See the version of you who has what you want to have, feels how you want to feel, and is who you want to be. I'm Brittany Hoopes, your hypnotherapist and manifestation coach, and this is the show where I'll teach you to master the full power of your mind, to guide you on your journey towards destination manifestation.
Take a step back for the ones who can't do that.
You're listening to the Destination Manifestation Podcast, where I help you align your mind so that you can manifest your dreams. My name's Brittany Hoopes. Welcome! How are you guys? I know I'm doing very well because it is quickly approaching, if not already there, to my favorite time of year. It is springtime in Austin, Texas. I love it because that means that it's wildflower season. Woo! I will tell you, I've been driving around looking at the bluebonnets. They're just starting to pop up and spring up, and that just makes me feel so happy. It only lasts for a couple weeks, but it is just so beautiful. I just love how there can be like gorgeous sheets of flowers in just the most random areas. It's really beautiful if you've never seen it. Anyways, I just want to say thank you so much. If you're already subscribed to the show, I appreciate you. I'm glad you're back. And today you were most definitely in for a treat. So I am so excited to geek out about all things manifestation and money with a fellow manifestation coach and a friend of mine. And her name is Cozadd. So Kat is a money manifestation coach, and she's also the host of another podcast you may or may not listen to, which is the No Bullshit Manifestation Show. I freaking love that show. And in this episode, Kat and I are going to let you in on a little manifestation secret. Well, actually, I should say we're going to let you in on multiple, huge, life-changing manifestation secrets that really shouldn't ever be secrets for anyone as long as you have the knowledge and the know-how and can learn the skills that we're going to be teaching here today. Because we're going to go deep, deep, deep into the energetics of manifesting money. Because I hate to say it, but actually, I'm very proud to say it. There's nothing special about me. There's nothing special about Kat, although you will soon find out she's a very special person. Money is just available to anyone. Like, if we can do it, so can you. And you know my story. You'll learn her story. You'll see that there's nothing special, quote unquote, about any of us, right? Anyone and everyone who chooses to learn how to tune into the frequency of the energy of money can do so. And so we're going to talk about all different kinds of money manifestation techniques, but really all different kind of aspects of manifestation in general. So even if manifesting money isn't necessarily your focus right now, which I'll say this, I've rarely met someone who wouldn't find a little extra cash to be a good thing. So regardless, I think you'll find something valuable here. I know that you're bound to learn something that you can apply to whatever your manifestation happens to be, based on what we cover in this episode. Plus, I will say this, if you love this conversation, if you're like, I want more of this, you are in luck. Because guess what? Kat interviewed me over on her podcast, the No Bullshit Manifestation Show. And so you can check that out. If you want to have yet another completely different yet fabulous talk where we have a completely different conversation about manifestation and we go deep into hypnotherapy and how you can use hypnosis to help you manifest, you can find that there. So without further ado, here's Kat.
Take a step back.
Welcome. So happy to have you here today.
I'm so happy to be here today, Brittany.
So Kat, let me ask you this. For anyone who may be unfamiliar with you, tell me just your manifestation story. We all have one, and I want to hear yours. How did you become acquainted with this wonderful world of manifestation, and what led you to ultimately becoming a money manifestation coach?
Yeah, so taking it as far back as you need to get the picture of it. Growing up, I grew up in a house with alcohol abuse. My dad was an alcoholic and my mom was not a citizen of the US. So to stay here and raise me and my brother, she and we as a family went through some really challenging things. And I felt very unsafe at a young age, which I didn't understand until way later on. But that ultimately led me to gaining a ton of weight as a kid. I was overweight. I was severely bullied for that. I constantly felt like there was something inherently wrong with me. And in my teenage years, I hit hopelessness for the first time ever, where I was experiencing just like suicidal thoughts and feelings of not wanting to be here anymore. And I was introduced to therapy at that time for the first time ever, which definitely was helpful, but it felt like it was putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And that only worked for a short period of time. And when it stopped working, I then turned to drugs and alcohol. And I was using drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism. And that worked for a short period of time, too. It was fun as hell for a short period of time until it wasn't. And I was in the position where I had dropped out of university. I was working as a server and a bartender. And I wanted to essentially like start over, run away from it all, have something to like try and reach for and create a new life out of. And so in the spring of 2019, I moved my life across state lines for the first time ever in hopes of starting a new life and thinking that I would have that. And little did I know that all of the things that I was trying to run away from would actually follow me and be amplified because I didn't have all of the comforts of home. And so I found myself in my rock bottom position, what I can now say was my rock bottom position, where I was $70,000 in debt, working 60 plus hours a week as a barista, living paycheck to paycheck, and was so completely like sad, lost, broke, hopeless, and was in the same place of like, something has to change if my life is going to go forward. And so I started to pray, and I didn't know to what, because at that time I didn't feel very deeply connected to my spirituality. And in the 11th hour, after a night of partying so hard I probably shouldn't be here, I woke up on the floor of my apartment, and I had this like insane rush of energy come through my body. It almost felt like, I don't know, like electricity, like a light healing energy come through my body. And it was literally in the moments after that I picked myself up off the ground, walked over to my bathroom mirror, looked myself dead in the eyes, and I said out loud to myself, Kat, you have the power to change your life. So why haven't you yet? And later that day, I was reintroduced to the power of intentional manifestation via a podcast that popped up on my Instagram feed. And I didn't know what I was supposed to do with it, but I decided to listen to this podcast episode, and every single thing that this woman was talking about was resonating with me. So I, again, had no clue what I was being called to do, but intuitively it felt like something I needed to put all of my focus and attention into. And so I did. I went all in about learning about intentional manifestation and implementing it into my life. And my life changed so drastically, so quickly. And I just started sharing about it on social media. I started posting about it on my Instagram story. I started sharing it with people in my life. And very quickly, people wanted to receive support from me within it. So I started helping people. And within a matter of months, I then realized I could turn this into a coaching business. So started my coaching business in January 2020. 10 months into it, I hit my first 6 figures. I've continued to scale up since that point. I've helped hundreds of people in my coaching containers in the past 4.5 years, or not even 4.5, 4 and a little bit years. I've reached hundreds of thousands of people through my social media and my podcast. And I genuinely, like, I'm living a life now that I never thought was possible for me. And it's all thanks to the power of intentional manifestation. So I literally could not be more thankful and more grateful for this tool.
Isn't it amazing? And that's what I just love about, folks like you and I that are in this industry, manifestation. Like, we all come here because, and not, I guess I can't say we all, I guess I'm sure there's somebody out there who hasn't, but most of us find ourselves wanting to be here because we've had this huge transformational, life-changing experience ourselves. And then we want to share that with others, or we do share our own experience, and that catches the attention of others. Like you shared, like somebody who knew you and knew where you were at before and then saw in real time you go through this transformation. They're going to be like, hell yeah, sign me up. Like, look what this girl did. Like, and I can speak to that very clearly too. Like when I was first starting my business, it was just sharing kind of like what was happening in real time. And people were like, whoa, like what, what was going on? And then Big Brother came up and then they're like, wait, she's been talking about that for years and now she's doing it, all these things sort of come up. So I want to go back to something that you said kind of before when you were sort of trying out multiple modalities, if you will, right? Emotional numbing techniques or healing techniques or anything to try to manage the emotions that were happening. You said you did therapy and that worked until it didn't. You tried drugs and alcohol that worked until it didn't, right? There's so many different ways that I like to call almost like emotional band-aids. My question to you, Kat, and your experience was like, how did you recognize what was a Band-Aid over an open wound, like you said, versus something that really healed the wound as opposed to being a cover-up? Like, what's the difference and how could you tell the difference between the two in your experience?
I don't think I recognized it until after the fact. Like, I didn't realize how much I was numbing until I actually was healing. And so that's been such an interesting process for me because even in what you just said of like people who knew me and have seen this process unfold, one of the most common things that I've heard from them, my mom included, is like, Kitty, I didn't know how bad it was. And it's like, neither did I. Like, I genuinely didn't understand how bad it was until after the fact when I was no longer numb to the experience. And so, like, yeah, being able now to look back and be like, after doing like genuine healing, that those things were putting Band-Aids over bullet holes. I think that so much of that experience, and I think that this is something that I not only have offered to myself, but I offer to the listeners is like, you're not gonna know. Like, you're not gonna know until you're actually in it. And yes, there are so many different proven modalities out there, hypnotherapy being one of them, somatic healing being one of them, EFT tapping being one of them. Like, there's so many different things out there, but it may not work for you in the way that it works for somebody else. So being able to just be willing to try, because I know people who go to talk therapy and think it's the best thing on planet Earth. I go to talk therapy and I'm like, I fucking hate this. Why would I ever talk to somebody about all of my trauma and all of my wounds instead of just healing those things?
Keeping it going and alive in the moment, right? Yeah.
Totally. But it is. It's like, I feel as though for so many people, it is like, there's almost a process that you have to go through where you are putting Band-Aids over things until you get to the place where there is enough resources or enough awareness within yourself to actually start to heal. Because I don't think that at the point where I was using other like coping mechanisms like therapy or drugs or alcohol, I was necessarily ready to actually heal. And it wasn't until like I came out the other side of both of those things, or I was at a place of so much pain that I was like, oh, okay, like something has to change. And at that point, I still didn't know that tapping into manifestation and the inner work surrounding manifestation was going to heal me. Right. But it was giving myself the willingness to do it and then being able to like look back and be like, oh, it actually all has changed.
And that's so interesting that you mentioned. It kind of almost makes me think of like a chicken before the egg sort of thing. Like, does the willingness to heal come first before the healing? Or do you find the modality that resonates with you that then creates the willingness to heal? I know I have a personal opinion about it, but I'm curious what has been your experience and what you see with others. Like, how do you get to that place? I know not everyone, although many people might, you and I both share this in common, had kind of a big, visceral, memorable experience. You being like on the floor and then looking in the mirror and being like, okay, you can change your life. Myself, I felt like I had a download that was just like, life will be better than you could ever imagine if you get on the other side of this. People may or may not have that kind of experience, but like, do you think the willingness to heal comes first and that leads you to the modality? You attract the modality that's going to help you? Or through this process of trying a bunch of different things and seeing what resonates with you, does that create it? I'm curious what you think.
Honestly, that's such a good question. I would say in my experience of working with hundreds of people over the past few years, it's been a combination of both of those things. I don't think it is a one size fits all. I think that a lot of the times, there may not be a full willingness to heal, but there is some sort of level of willingness to heal because they wouldn't be curious about it in the first place if there wasn't some sort of part of them that's pulling them to it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's the most common experience that I see. But I think that on the other side of that, like I've witnessed so many people in my personal life that have had absolutely no willingness to heal, but they've almost been forced to because of the circumstance that they're in, that like, whether it be God, the universe, source, divine, whatever you want to call it, that's like, here you go. Like you literally have to start to use this. And they do without knowing that there is this conscious part of themselves that is in need of that thing. But I would say that's probably the less common example that I see with it. I typically see, especially, I mean, for both of us in the coaching space, we see people with willingness to want to show up in some sort of capacity, even if they don't want to show up, there's some sort of subconscious part of themselves that's like, this is the path that starts to take them to that place. What's your experience of it?
I mean, it's interesting because, you know, as you were talking, I can resonate with so much of that. I think what's interesting about hypnotherapy you know, and is that some people, and I will say it's a very little minority, but some people have a misunderstanding of what it is and kind of think it's like woo-woo magic that I'll just go like this and boom, and they're going to be healed. And so there maybe isn't a willingness to do what it takes on their part to take the ownership of the healing. Because there's a good amount of ownership that comes with healing too, that you cannot just hand over, you know, the hurt, the bullet wound completely to somebody else. There could be people like you and I that guide and help and help you. But I always say, like, I'm the conductor of the orchestra, but you play the instrument. Like, that is what it really is. And especially when it comes to hypnotherapy, because I cannot hypnotize anybody against their will, nor would I want to. The subconscious mind has to be open enough to accept it. And I always think about it in terms of like manifestation, right? If somebody thinks that something will not work for them and they are unwilling, they're the best manifester in the world. It won't work for them. Boom, you manifested it. Great job. You're actually wonderful at this. Like, that's how that works, you know? And so I think it is kind of interesting. I feel like you said, there has to be like an initial willingness to change. And I'll do exactly like what you said. Remind them, like, why are you here? You wouldn't have showed up here today if you thought 100% that it couldn't change. So talk to me about that part, you know?
100%.
So Kat, let me ask you this. So when you first started your own business, like, You mentioned that, like, oh, you were seeing some shifts. People were like, whoa, look what this girl's doing. I want a piece of that. And it kind of built from there, right? Like, what was your intention there? Like, was it being a money manifestation coach or was it something else? Like, how did you get there?
Yeah. So absolutely not, because like I said, at the time I was $70,000 in debt. I was working for $825 as a barista.
Yeah.
Like, the idea of a money manifestation coach was not something that felt like what I was going for. It was more so the healing aspect of it, because I went from the place where I was so self-loathing and had such little, if not any, self-worth, to feeling so confident and sure of myself and like connected to my purpose, that I was like, okay, that's what I want to help people start to do and see. And within doing that, I mean, so like I said, I started my business in January 2020. By the middle of April, I had my first 10K month.
Wait, can we just pause for a second? January 2020, that's when you started. So right before the pandemic.
Yep.
But by April, which we are like now in pandemic zone,
and
you're
like
hitting
the
these
panic of the pandemic.
How did you? I know we're like so done with like talking about pandemic stuff, but I'm just interested in like how did you navigate all the uncertainty in the world? I mean, you're in New York. You were in New York by that time, or were you still in Colorado?
No, I was in Boise, Idaho.
Boise, Idaho. Sorry,
that's where I lived for a year. And I was working as a barista during that time, and I had said to myself, like, loosely in my mind before any of the stuff surrounding the pandemic had even come up, that I was like, okay, I want to be done with this by the end of March. And then pandemic rolls around and I was like, no option, like,
you're done with it.
Headed back to Colorado.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like during that uncertainty, so I had a brief moment of like, holy shit, what does this mean? And for me and for my business.
Yeah.
And I gave myself permission to think about that, honestly, for probably less than 10 minutes. And I was like, I'm the powerful creator of my reality. And I am choosing that this is actually going to help me thrive. This is going to like be the thing that actually like projects me forward and helps me create the life that I want. And yeah, I was like, started January 2020. I had my first client in January. The next month, I think I had another 2 or 3 people sign on. March, another 2 or 3 people sign on. And then April, I was like, let's go. And I had my first 10K month and I completely booked out my coaching services by then.
Look at that. In one of the most uncertain periods of recent history. So like just everybody listening, like, look at that. Listen to that. Like, even in quote unquote uncertainty, society might say, these things can still happen. And I think what resonates with me, what you said, that is like, you decided who you are. Like, you sat in that seat and you're like, I am a powerful creator. So what do I create? It makes me think of a coaching session I had with a client just last night that was like, you know, it's so easy for us to like chase what we think is successful out there. Like, oh, this is selling well, so I'm going to go do this, or like chase the success that we think is out there and then let that guide our decisions. But really where the power comes from is being like, no, I'm the success. What do I want to bring to me? What do I want to create? And that's like 100%. It's a total flip, but it's everything. It's everything. Yeah. And it sounds like that's what you did in that moment. You said, I create.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the thing that, and even post-pandemic, the level of uncertainty that we've had, especially like, I want to say the talk of the recession over the past 2 years now, and how fearful people have been financially because of all of this talk surrounding recession and seeing dips and interest rises going up and like all of these different things, is that the thing to remember is that anything can be happening externally, but like your personal vibration is what creates your reality. So like you can be going through, totally, we can be going through any form of uncertainty, but if you tap into your own personal vibration, what you just said, and what I always say to my clients is like, you can look at the external things all day long, but at the end of the day, you are the center point of your manifestation. So if you're not good with you, it doesn't matter what's going on externally. No. That's just going to amplify what you're already experiencing. And if you can take the finger and point it back around at yourself and be like, okay, I am the center point of my manifestations. What do I need to get right within myself so that I feel solid, I feel secure, I feel confident, I feel powerful, I feel abundant, I feel whatever it may be, then that's all I actually need to then influence my external reality in a way that serves and supports me.
Oh, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of like going to the grocery store. It's like all the food can be on the shelves, but does it need to be will it make it into your cart? Like, it's not a problem that there's a food that you really don't like, that it's on the shelf and that you could buy it. That's not a problem that it's there. You just decide what goes into your cart.
Yeah, it's only a problem if you put it in your cart. Why
if you put it in your cart? Don't put it in your cart. Put it back on the shelf. You don't want to bring that home. No. So tell me, Kat, like, you know, let's geek out. I love to hear a good manifestation story. Tell me about your favorite manifestation to date. Like, what's one of your like, whoa, I can't believe that happened, blow your mind manifestations?
Yeah, so I would actually say the apartment that I live in New York City.
Ooh, I've gotten a virtual tour. It is gorgeous, by the way. It is very, very cool.
I love it so much. So when I first moved to New York City, I'm self-employed, we can make the assumption of with being a manifestation coach. But when I first moved to New York, I was only like a year and a half into being self-employed or something like that. And I didn't have proof of income far enough back to get an actual like apartment here in the city. So I lived in Airbnbs for the first year of living here, which was fun because I got to try out different parts of the city and try out different like what worked best for me. And I ended up being in an Airbnb for 6 months that I absolutely adored, that is actually just like literally on the block in front of here in a brownstone. And I was so obsessed with this neighborhood. I love it so much. And I went away for 4 months. I went to the UK and I was visiting family and whatnot over there. And when I was coming back to New York, I was like, okay, I want to live literally in this specific building that I'm in right now, that is 1 block away from the Hudson River, that is like in a prime location to my gym, to my co-working space, to all of the things that I have going on in New York. And I set the intention for this specific building. There was no units available when I first got back. So I went into another Airbnb, and I had told myself that I was going to live in that Airbnb for 3 months. I got back that first week, and they were doing construction that I didn't know about on the building, specifically on my balcony, from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night with a jackhammer.
Oh,
And
no,
so-
not good for coaching sessions, is that?
Not good for coaching sessions, not good for the nervous system, not good
No,
for anything.
nothing.
So
Oh, no.
I was like crawling out of my skin every single day. And I thought that I was locked into this Airbnb because I had booked it for several months. And I was like, I need to look for an apartment regardless. Like, and an apartment unit showed up in this building, the one that I'm actually in right now. And so I started to put like everything together to come tour it, walked in, knew it was my place. But then I started to go through the application process. And again, because I had only been self-employed for 2-something years, they're like, we don't have enough proof of income from you. So there are all of these hurdles, all of these obstacles. We got to the place where it was like, well, maybe my cousin can sign onto this as her place, but I'll be the person who actually lives here, like figuring all those things out. And we got to that place, but I kept showing up every single day to actually talk to the manager in person and just like see what was a possible reality. I wasn't calling and like talking to somebody on the phone. I just kept on showing up. And we were coming to the day where they had held it for me for a week, and they're like, if we can't figure it out by Friday, we have to put it back on the market, and somebody already wants it. So like essentially it wouldn't be yours anymore.
Yeah.
And I show back up in this state of like, okay, what's meant to be will be. And I've done all that I can do. And I walk into the manager's office, and he was like, I was just about to call you. And I was like, you did? Or you were? And he essentially was like, I went to bat for you. Like, I went to bat for your case. Like, you're clearly qualified to live here. But I had to take it to the corporate office to have some things rearranged, but we've changed our policy. And now you're able to like be here without having other people sign on as somebody on your lease. And that happened on November 11th of 2022. So 11/11/2022, which as we know is a magical number in the world of manifestation.
So magical.
Yeah. And the following Monday, which was the 14th of November of 2022, I got to move into this apartment.
Look at that, Kat. So you said a few things I want to like dissect and go a little deeper into. So you said initially that you set the intention. You knew that this was the building. You knew that this is the block, the neighborhood, everything you wanted. Like, talk to me more about that. So like the mechanics behind how you manifested this. When you set the intention, what did that entail? How did you know? What did you do mentally, physically, emotionally? Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah, honestly. So after living in the brownstone down on the block in front of me, I like energetically and I guess emotionally just felt so at home here. And like, even like when I am walking back from somewhere else in the city home, I get to like these last 2 blocks and I'm like, like safe. I feel home. I feel so secure. I feel so like solid inside of my body. And so I took that as like a very clear like sign of, okay, this is something that's in alignment with my soul. I'd say aside from that, like complete honesty, like I'm not a big journaler. Like I hardly ever write my manifestations down.
Yeah.
I am very big on like creating the vision behind things. And I make declarations to the people in my life. So like I said to my mom that I was going to be living in this exact building and have a view of the mural that I have across the street. And
that's interesting. Cause I know some people are like, oh, don't tell anybody about your manifestations.
Yeah.
Like, but are you, you do. I do too. And I love to hear that you said this. I don't want to like derail us, but I love to hear that you said this because I will admit, I'll be the first to admit, like I've kind of felt like some low key shame by the fact that I tell people but it just goes to show like, if that works for you, that works for you. I mean, gosh, if you listen to my podcast, you guys know what I'm in the process of manifesting. Like I don't take it as when you're manifesting, you told your mom, like, I'm going to live here. Like, and did it happen that very day you told her? Most likely not, would be my guess, right? There was a gap of time, right? Just like I'm sure my manifestations, did it happen right then? That doesn't mean it's not going to, just because you declare it and it's not that same day. So for anybody who might be feeling that way, being like, but didn't TikTok say, don't tell anyone, you do what feels good to you. Do what feels good to you.
Honestly, I feel like part of that, and this may not be the experience for everybody, but it's like, I feel as though sometimes people don't want to share because they don't have full conviction in the fact that it's going to happen. I had full conviction in the fact that it's going to happen. Every manifestation I talk about, I have full conviction in the fact that it's going to happen. So I'm like, yeah, why would I not tell people? Like, yeah, why would I do not?
Recognize, I will say a little caveat. There have been times where, and maybe this isn't the most fair thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyways. There's been times where there's been certain people I have not told because I know the energy that they bring on that subject, and I know that energy is not a match. And so I think it is like even kind of what you said about like this feeling safe. I love how you said that, because I know you do so much with like somatics and stuff like that. It's like, of course, when you set the intention, it doesn't need to be something you wrote 7 times down on a journal, right? It was something that you felt in your body. It was an energy. It was a safety. It was home. The energy of home. When you're vibrating the energy of home, what are you going to match? You're going to match that home. You're going to match that place. And I will say the caveat that there have been times where I have not shared manifestations with certain people because of the vibration that I knew they had on the subject, which I know wasn't a match for its fulfillment. And so there would be a time and place when to share it with them. And I know that they probably need it to be a little bit more physical until they bring the vibration that matches it, which is fine. That's when they'll find
Absolutely.
out,
100%. It's discernment and who you choose to share your energy with, period. Like, I feel as though that's something to like that people overlook a lot of the time in their experience of whatever it is that they're creating, is that there's not a level of discernment of who they choose to spend their time with, and therefore they become depleted in whatever it is, and that energy can actually be used towards creating what it is that you want. So absolutely, like a different example, and we can go back to what you're talking about, but when I first started my intentional manifestation journey back in 2019, my parents came to visit me in Boise, Idaho in October of 2019. And we went out to dinner one night, and I said to them, okay, guys, I'm going to be moving back to Colorado in the next 5 months. And when I move back, I'll be making at least $10,000 a month and driving an Audi Q5. And both of them looked at me like, okay, like,
all right, cat.
Like, all right, like, whatever you say goes. And I then moved back to Colorado driving an Audi Q5, making at least $10,000 a month. But I didn't share that with my brother, and I didn't share that with some of my friends, because I knew that in where I was at and what I was creating, I didn't care for the judgments and opinions of them. So I don't need to share what I am experiencing with those kinds of people. So yeah, just as an offering for the people who are listening, it's like, you don't have to share everything with everybody. That's not you withholding truth. That's not you lying. That's not anything. Like, that is you being discerning over your energy. That is you protecting your energy. Protect your energy. It's the most important thing that you have.
Kat, another thing. So that was talking about, okay, kind of the intention. It sounds like the intention was much more of an energetic feeling and an energetic match. You came up against, in that an example that you shared about your apartment, you came up against a lot of different obstacles where like reality was showing you that it didn't look probable. Talk to me more in depth about that. You said that you kind of were like, hey, whatever happens, that's going to be fine. But like, again, the 3D outside world is showing you like, not seeming to go this way. And yet you were maintaining a certain energy. How did you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am such a firm believer. I think that a lot of times, myself included, that in the past, it's like looking at where things are being met with resistance. And I'm like, oh, the universe doesn't want me to have that thing. And it's like, is that true? Or is the universe giving you the exact lesson that you need to become resilient and get what you want? And so in a circumstance like that, and like different circumstances that I've experienced, whether it be business, relationship wise, whatever it may be, I really see it as like, okay, connecting to myself, my body, my intuition, my soul. Is this something that I like truly desire for myself from a space of like, this is something aligning with the higher vision that I have for my life?
Yeah.
Or is this something that is coming from almost like an egoic place? Is this something that's coming from like lack or fear if I don't have it? And so specifically within that situation with the apartment, I had already came to a place of like what's meant for me will be. And like if I need to go stay at this Airbnb where they're jackhammering on my balcony for 12 hours a day, then like so be it, because I've already paid for that experience. But I know based off of how I feel inside of my body. And for me, I don't know how much your listeners know about like human design, but I'm a generator and I'm a sacral generator. So like, I know things in my body. Like I physically feel what is right for me and what is wrong for me in my body. And this apartment felt right for me. So although there were so many obstacles that were coming up, I was like, yeah, but there's still this feeling inside of me of this is it. So I'm going to face these obstacles with this detachment to the outcome. Of course I want it, but like if this isn't it, I'm not going to like lose sleep over it or feel so upset about it or be devastated by it. So it's really, and I think that that's like honestly the experience for most people in manifestation that is somewhat challenging is like being able to balance this paradox of like fully belief and conviction and doing whatever it takes to get the thing that you desire, like unconditionally pursuing what it is that you want, while also meeting it with like, and if it doesn't happen, that's okay. I'm going to be fine regardless.
And both of those have to exist at the same time, and both are equally true at the same time. It's like how, you know? And so I guess my question to you is like, if you ever notice yourself wavering, whether it be you or maybe it's a client you're coaching on this, like what does the person do in your opinion when they find themselves wavering, when maybe they're looking at outside reality and they're not holding that balance of that paradox and they're prioritizing what is happening, the obstacle around them more than the realness of the inner knowing? Because it sounds like for you, it was like you knew what home felt like, and home could have been this apartment. If it fell through, it could have been something else. You just know the realness of that internal experience within you. You felt that deeply. How did you let that realness, how did you not let the outside realness of the like things that you can taste, touch, hear, smell, like your 3D reality outweigh the realness that you felt inside? What advice would you have there?
Such a good question. So I would say that in that kind of situation, I'm just such a firm believer in the fact that like the outside reality isn't that real. Like it's really not that real.
Yes, I love it.
It's like what we're experiencing on the external is such a reflection of what's going on the inside. So it's like really just bringing yourself back to what's going on in the inside, but yes, continuing to take those necessary steps in like the external. So I guess like an example of this, I've worked with like comedians in the past, and there's been the experience of like externally not getting any validation, not getting any recognition, not getting any sort of validation for what it is that they are doing. And that feeling really challenging for them, but being able to continue to cultivate. And I think that that's ultimately it, is like cultivate this deep understanding of who you are independent of what is happening externally from you, because any of these external things could fall through at any moment. Like none of these things are guaranteed. Nothing in life is guaranteed. And the only thing that you do have power over is what is happening for you inside of yourself, inside of your own human experience. And so coming back to that and like, I thinking particularly about one client, it's like she has been able to align herself so fully with the vision that she has for herself that although she experienced so much rejection, so many of these things happening externally from her, she's now anchored so deeply into this that like a managing team reached out to her. She's now being managed. She now is like being able to be produced in different ways than she has before. She's now getting more reach than she ever has before. And I think that that's like truly being able to look at like, we've been conditioned to believe that when I see it, then I'll believe it. But like what you're seeing is a byproduct of what you believe. So you have to believe it first. And honestly, I mean, the short answer to this is like, I've had a ton of practice in this.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I feel like I've approached manifestation in a really extreme way because my circumstances were so extreme when I started this journey that it's like there's literally no option but to choose myself and choose my internal experience over what is happening externally every single time. And I think that that's like, I don't know, something that could be of value to the people listening is that like, if you want something that seems so unrealistic to what you have right now, you have to be kind of unrealistic in going and getting it.
Yeah. You want to manifest unrealistic. You need to be in it and create something unrealistic, right? And that's what you'll get. It kind of reminds me as you were talking, it was like, I moved from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas a couple years ago. And I made that long halfway cross country drive multiple times. I think it's like 24 hours or something from LA to Austin. And you have to drive through Arizona and like West Texas. Like, Kat, I saw like literal tumbleweeds across the highway, like a cougar went across the highway. Like, you are out in the middle of nowhere that you're like, oh my gosh, if my car broke down right now, like no one is here, right? Those thoughts go through your head. Imagine if that was you kind of like on your way to your destination and you looked around and you stopped in the middle of West Texas and there's tumbleweeds. You'd be like, this is not going right. Like, this is not where I wanted to end up, right? Like, this is not where I want to be. But that's precisely where you want to be on the route to where you're going, like on the route to what you're manifesting. So like when I think of your example with your apartment, like the moment before that manager was like, I pulled some strings and you're good. And it was looking really bleak. Like that was you in the middle of West Texas, but that was exactly where you were supposed to be. It didn't look like you having the apartment whatsoever. It looked like things were going quote unquote wrong. It wasn't going to happen, but it was en route. Like you were actually exactly where you needed to be. And so it's really unfair for any of us, because we do not see that big picture until afterwards. Sometimes we don't see it till way afterwards, but it is really unfair for any of us to zoom out and look at where we currently are and yet put a judgment on that didn't happen or is wrong or off track or any of these things, because we don't know. It can look like you are nowhere near where your destination needs to be, but yet it's right exactly where you need to be at the time.
Totally. And it's like, if you were to stop right there, that's like, then of course you're going to believe that it isn't. You just stopped too soon. Like you were still on the track. You were still on the road. You were supposed to keep driving to get to that place, but you stopped there. So of course it looks like you didn't manifest what you wanted into your life because you stopped too soon.
Because you stopped too soon. Oh, that's just one of my things. I think I've said this before on the show, but it's like, it's one of my like saddest, like, to think of all the amazing artists, all the amazing authors, all the amazing performers, all the amazing musicians. Like, think of all the beauty in the world that maybe we haven't had a chance to experience because somebody stopped too soon. Like, and don't, like, if you were listening to this show, me and Kat are telling you, don't stop too soon. Like, we need that thing that you're creating. Because it's just right there. And of course, it's going to look like you're out in the middle of nowhere and that you're not anywhere near where you need to be, because that's the route. You just got to keep going past that part and trust the internal experience. It's like, that's your map. Like that's how you know. Kat, I want to shift gears here just for a moment because I want to get into like money. Like, let's talk about money manifestation. Like, money manifestation, what's that process like for you? Or when you think about some of your biggest money manifestations, like what are some of the core principles, particularly when you look at money, that tend to be at play?
Yeah, so I would say 3 core principles come into place when we talk about money. One is being able to cultivate internal safety, because oftentimes we deem money as the thing that provides safety and security for us, when in reality, money is inherently neutral. It's not good, it's not bad, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's not negative, it's not positive. It's just money. It's just energy. So being able to create internal safety is honestly probably the most important one. Second one is recognizing that money manifestation hardly ever has anything to do with money itself, and typically actually has to do with your relationship to yourself, the way you perceive fear, judgment, failure, discomfort, relationships to other people, the world, so on and so forth, and recognizing like what blocks have you been placing onto money that are actually unrelated to money and something more internal. And then the last one is being able to recognize your relationship with money, and like actually, if money was a person, what would that relationship look like? Because I think that people forget that we're in relationship to everything. I'm in relationship to this computer right now, to this water bottle that I'm not drinking, to money, even though I'm not like actively engaging with like spending money or saving money or anything in this very moment. I'm still interacting with money because we're having this conversation about it. So being able to like place that understanding of like, okay, if money was a person, how would I be treating that person, and would that person want to hang out in my life based off of how I'm currently treating it? Then understanding your dynamic with it through that.
Oh, I love all of that. Like, can we take each one and kind of like go a little deeper? So the first one you said was about like the energy of safety and stability. That just, I feel like I knew this, but like just an aha moment, the way that you described it, like, of course, so many of us associate stability, safety, comfort even with money. And so then when we talk about that internal experience being more real than the external, if we can talk to me more about how you tap into when you haven't had maybe a history of feeling safe around money. How can you create that internal experience to match the energy of money within yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like the first two that I talked about kind of tie into each other.
Yeah.
Because when you're having some sort of internal experience that says, I'm not good enough, or there's not enough, or whatever it may be, any sort of limiting story that you have about yourself, of course you feel unsafe. You're basically stating that like, I am not enough. My existence doesn't matter. I am not worthy, whatever it may be. Of course you don't feel safe. So before even addressing internal safety, at least for my clients, we go through a process of understanding like what is the story that you're telling yourself about your life, but more so like what is the story that you're telling yourself about yourself, and why are you telling yourself that story? And then being able to identify, okay, where did you learn that in the first place? Because everything is a learned behavior. Everything is a learned habit. Everything is a learned emotion. Like we come blank. Like we come as an empty iPod Nano with very basic programming of how to breathe, how to eat, how to sleep, how to cry, how to poop, how to do all of those things. But otherwise, we're receiving all of those songs that, like, if people still remember what iPod Nanos are based off of your listener base. But it's like we're downloading the songs from that point moving forward. So understanding that everything is a learned behavior. So the way that you perceive yourself, somebody taught you about that. You didn't decide those things on your own. So going through and understanding like, what are the way that I like to see this is like, if your life was a garden, what are the weeds in the garden? Like, what are those major weeds? I think all of us have 3 to 5 major weeds and a bunch of little weeds that are a byproduct of those. And if we can identify what the major weeds are in the garden and pull those up from the ground level, then you bring up all of the other nonsense with it, and create space in the ground to then plant new seeds of what you're choosing to be true about yourself and about your life moving forward, which then with time and consistency, tending to it and watering it, you grow new flowers in its place instead. And so when it comes to the internal safety piece, it starts with understanding what are those stories that you're telling yourself and about money, and being able to assess and understand where you learned those from and work through the healing process of that with so many different modalities. I know we mentioned some of them earlier, but with like somatic healing, that's what I specialize in, is actually identifying where this energy is living inside of your body and helping you move through it and process it so that you're actually cellularly creating space. Hypnotherapy, massive one. EFT tapping, meditation, like all of these different things, so many different tools that are available to help remove those weeds from the garden. But once you're at that place, creating internal safety, subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So being able to actually consciously prove to yourself and talk to yourself about how safe you actually are. So one of the like kind of holy shit moments that I had back in 2020 is I had just gone through a very traumatic experience. And on the other side of processing that, I was like, I've never felt safe in my entire life. And it was like this earth-shattering moment. Got in the shower, cried my eyes out, was like, how the fuck do I move forward from this point? And basically came to the understanding of like, I need to teach myself how to feel safe. And so I looked for like, where's the place that I feel safest in my life right now? Even if it's not full safety, what is that? And at the time, it was my bed. So every single time I got in bed, I would notice the physical feeling of safety of being able to roll my shoulders back, put my head back, kind of like flop into the bed.
Yeah.
And then I would repeat safety affirmations to myself of like, I am safe. I am safe to be here. I'm safe in my body. I'm safe to experience this. I'm safe in my emotion. And with time and consistency of that, then I started to understand and recognize what safety felt like for me to then cultivate that in other areas. And then in addition to that, there's so much that goes into nervous system regulation to be able to create that safety inside of the body outside of those spaces that you feel the most safe, and just being super proactive with nervous system regulation, because if you're constantly in an upregulated nervous system state, you're in a state of stress, your brain is immediately going to go to what is the potential danger. And that, of course, then doesn't create that safety for you within your relationship to your finances. So being able to be as proactive in your relationship to yourself with nervous system regulation then sets you up for success to be more successful within your finances.
Oh, absolutely. And I love how everything you're saying, like my mind is like going a mile a minute as you're talking, because I'm like, oh, there's so many beautiful crossovers, like, you know, somatics, nervous system regulation, hypnotherapy, how one can facilitate the other. I'm sure I don't want to speak out of turn, but I'm sure when you're doing somatic work with folks, people are accessing and almost going into at least a deep meditative or trance-like state while they're doing that work. Whereas I can see the exact inverse happening too. Like there's so much good somatic work happening through hypnotherapy. Like when you were talking about, okay, like you knew in your bed that you felt safest, like we would call that like resource state regression in hypnotherapy, where like in a session, if it's like, okay, if I had a client that has lost weight before and knows what that feeling is to be like motivated, let's say, like they are, you know, in this case, you were looking to create safety. Where do I know in my life that safety that I can kind of apply to other instances? Say a client wants to feel motivated and they know that they've felt that way again. We can like regress them back to that moment and almost like copy paste it to where they want to feel that energy or that emotion, because that's all emotion is vibration, is energy in the body. Where can they take that memory or even that current experience in a different area of their life and almost copy and paste it where they're growing that? Because if the brain and the body has a memory of that and has an experience of that, it can learn to apply it in other areas. And so start with what you have, start with what you have and grow it from there. What I love that you said is about, like the story around it, and kind of pulling the weeds of the stories that are no longer serving you. I feel like even just kind of personally, and I want to ask you this before we go too, but like personally, I've been kind of, what manifestation thing have I been kind of like chewing on the most, like here recently? I feel like we all have something that we're kind of like really living very viscerally right now. And I feel like right now that's mine. It's like, it's again, doing like what Dr. Joe Dispenza says, is like going into nothing, where you're no one, like tuning into that kind of like one consciousness. And that means basically stripping away like all the identifying pieces of you, like, oh, the fact that I'm female, and the fact that I live here, and the fact that I'm this ethnicity, and the fact that I'm, have this personality, right? Like if I can strip away those things in a deep hypnotic or meditative state, I can tune in to sort of the oneness. And that really is kind of like ditching the story. I like to do this hypnotic process where I have my clients see the story that they're living as a book, and they open the book and they can see scenes from the book, and oh, there's this story. It's in this book, right? And then I tell them to look at what the title is on the book, and maybe it's something like my past or my trauma or something like this. And then I'll say, take that book cover off. in there in the hypnotic state, take the book cover off. And I want you to notice that once you take off that book cover, maybe it's one of those stretchy ones like in school or something like that, right? Like, you remember those? Like the little stretchy guys? You take that book cover off and then you just look at that story, and actually what it's called is struggle. Because that's all our stories are. They're just stories that reinforce our struggle. And when we can ditch those stories, like you talked about getting the weeds out of the garden, when we can get that out, we're left with clarity, and we're left with a space that we can begin to plant other things or rewrite different stories that might serve us. Because the stories that are leading to results that we don't want are just creating internal struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. I love that.
So let me ask you this. I shared with what I've kind of been like gnawing on and like really enjoying. Like, what aspect of manifestation or any of this work has kind of been like most like real to you here right now, like most visceral that you've been kind of working through here recently?
Yeah. So the thing that's been most present for me recently is literally just like, where is my attention going? Because like you just said, with the experience of struggle, so often we get so caught in thinking that we need to figure out the struggle and process the struggle and whatnot to be able to get to where we want, that we actually hold ourselves back from getting what we want, as opposed to, I'm such a firm believer in the fact that if you run towards what you want, or you run towards the thing that is uncomfortable, it makes itself known. So there's not this whole like deep process that you have to go through to identify all of these different blocks before you actually do the thing. It's like, go do the thing. Like,
you don't have to read that book. You don't have to read the struggle book. Like, we can put that book back on the shelf. Like, you don't have to read that book. Like, what book are you reading instead? You know?
Totally.
Just totally. You know, it's so funny you say that, Kat, because and there are some processes, and they can be very healing in hypnotherapy, regressions, things like that can address past things. But we only ever do that in service of replaying a new present moment. And so what I mean by that is like, okay, if it's healing for you to go back to a moment in your past and give yourself what you needed at that time, even the act of that isn't so much about the past. It's about making it what's healing for you in the present. All of it is about, you know, positive direction focused. It's not ruminating. And I think that's why when folks do the healing modalities like you and I do, it is a different experience than what you might experience in talk therapy, just inherent because it's not redrudging up what already happened and dissecting it and looking at it from this angle and this angle and this angle. It's more like, okay, here we only look at that to know of what is the opposite or what is the intended. If we don't want this anymore, what do we want? And focusing on that. So what have you done to kind of play with that focus? I'm sure a lot of it has to do with first awareness of where you're focusing to begin with. And then what do you do then?
Literally, I love that you just said this word. So I asked myself 2 questions. The first question is, what if the opposite were true? So it's like, if there's any sort of focus going into, oh, this is going to be hard, or if it's going to take a long time, or whatever it may be, I asked myself the question, what if the opposite were true? What if this was the easiest thing I've ever done? What if this happens tomorrow? Like, what if? Just like playing in the what if, because I know you know this, but when you allow yourself to do that, it opens up your reticular activating system to start to see the possibility of the newness. So I've been asking myself the question of like, what if the opposite were true? And then I've also been asking myself, so like once I catch myself in some sort of experience of like rehashing the old, I stop and I go, okay, and now what? And now what? Like, instead of continuing to focus on this, look at this, all the things from the past, and now what? What's happening now? What am I creating now? What am I recommitting to, or what am I committing to for the first time? And just being able to really like refocus the energy, because where attention goes, energy flows. So it's like, do you want to continue to pour it all into the past? Do you want to pour it into the struggles, into the things that are not working, into the fear, the doubt, whatever it may be? Or can you ask yourself the question of like, and now what? What do I actually want? What can actually be true for me if I was to focus my intention and my energy somewhere else?
I love that. And because, you know, sure, something might happen. I know there are a lot of what if questions can come up. I know a lot of the clients that I work with that have anxiety, they're like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? And I say, okay, well, let's answer it. What if? And it reminds me of and now what? And then, because we can always get to the other side of that. Well, then I'd lose my house. Okay, well, then what would you do after that? Then what if this? Okay, well, then how would you get past that? And we can always get to the other side of it. There's always something to the other side of it. And I love to even reframe that it changes from a what if question to an even if question. Even if I lose my house, even if this happens, now what? Now what? Now what? We can get to the other side of it. It looks like a big mountain when you're looking at it, but you can even taking it one step at a time, you will get on the other side of that mountain. And I love what you said first too about, what if this was equally as true, or what if the opposite was true? Because you can find evidence either way. Isn't the whole world, all of society, an example of that, finding evidence for both the duality of both sides? And we can use that for our own, just to put things into perspective. Because oftentimes what we're thinking isn't fact, it's opinion. And it's like, oh, this is going to be hard. Like the example you gave, that's an opinion, And so what if the opposite, what if we could find evidence for the opposite to be true?
Yeah.
So Kat, let me ask you this. Dream with me here for a moment, okay? What is future version of Kat like? What has manifested you like? The version of you has accomplished all your future goals, received your manifestations. What are you calling in right now?
Yeah, so I'm manifesting a world where I am a leading force, leading thought leader in
yes.
I think it's redefining the life coaching space. I feel like a lot of life coaching has been based in fear and scarcity and motivating people from the energy of fear and scarcity and being like, is that what you want? Versus love and light and genuine love and light and opportunity and possibility. So I see myself as a household name for redefining the life coaching space. I know that I will impact the lives of millions of people worldwide. I want to make very accessible resources for people to change their lives and to get into the world of manifestation to create whatever it is that they want. And I also know that a husband and a really happy family is a part of the equation for me. I have known ever since I was a little girl that I'm destined to be a mom. So I'm currently calling in my hubby wherever he may be, somewhere out on the
maybe
streets.
He's listening. Maybe he's a huge Destination Manifestation fan, and now he's like my dream woman. No, I mean, you guys
live in New York City.
Yeah, right. New York too. Everyone, find your friends, call your friends. New York, we need to find him. But no, Kat Cozadd, you guys know the name. Kat Cozadd, yes. Household name. All of it. All of it's there. All of it's there because it's already created within you. And now we just attract it. That's all it is. You know it, and it will be there. Absolutely. It already is.
Okay, now you dream with me.
Oh my gosh. I think my listeners are sick of hearing about my dreams. I will say I've created a very safe space where I talk about them quite frequently, but mine is all about manifesting that family right now. The babies, the spirit babies I know are out there. And, I'll just be completely kind of, vulnerable here for a second, but there's been a lot of kind of recent things in the news about Alabama and the IVF sort of rulings and things like that. And I would be lying if I said the past couple days I haven't had to do what we talked about today and stop hyper fixating on the external environment and tuning back in to who I am and the spirits that are in my orbit and that are going to experience life through me in whatever form that takes. And just having to remember the realness of that. And it's exactly what we're talking about, this balance between the internal world realness and the external world realness, and realizing that yes, both are real, but where you place your focus, where your attention goes, energy flows, right? And the energy flowing here. And I did sort of a hypnosis session this morning because I was feeling some pretty big anxiety about these things, focusing externally. You go on Instagram and it's the first thing you see. And so I just shut out the apps. I did a hypnosis session and I just kind of tuned into what I would consider the divine mother, that energy that exists within me. And just feeling that and knowing the realness of that. And that isn't to negate, laws that are passed and politics that are happening and things that are happening in the outside world. It's not to say like, oh, just whatever, that's fine. You know, like I don't believe that, but I also know that like the energy that I'm emitting is going to create my reality. And I know my babies are going to find a way through. And if it's not, you know, and if it's not IVF, then it wasn't IVF and we will find a way. So,
Absolutely.
And then also kind of recognizing, granted, I know things can very much change. And so I think that's where I'm, you know, the logical part of me kind of comes in, but it's like, I don't live in Alabama, so that it isn't true right now that I couldn't go get those services if I needed to. And so just fact checking yourself, you know, when you start spiraling and thinking, oh my gosh, and you kind of then being like, okay, where's the evidence where the opposite may be true, you know, because there's still evidence for that, even when things might start to look scary. And so I always hesitate kind of talking about this stuff because it's like, I don't ever want to negate anybody's experience or what might be happening, like on a law-based political level. But at the same time, I know I'm not in the best space to manifest what I meant to manifest and like the spirits I meant to manifest into physical form. If I'm focused on those external things, that's not going to help that happen. So
totally.
That was kind of a very evolved answer.
I love it. And I see what you're talking about as like, this isn't so much negating somebody's experience, but giving them an opportunity to see it differently. Because the same is true in finances. Like there's so much nuance to every single thing that we talk about. But ultimately, at the end of the day, knowing what we know and knowing what we want to encourage everybody else to be able to come on board with is like, these are universal laws, regardless of what is happening, regardless of what your external circumstances may be or could look like right now. This is an opportunity to shift your energy and reframe it in the most loving, kind, endearing way that we possibly can hand it over to you. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, like, we are in charge of our own personal experience through our own personal vibration and allowing like the divine to come through you and live through you in the way that you're supposed to. So it really is. I see it more as an invitation more so than like you negating somebody's experience in any sort of way.
Right. And, you know, that was kind of the mantra that sort of came up for me. I won't say it's the most positive one, but it's one that lights an internal fire that helps me refocus internally as opposed to externally. And it's the idea of I regulate my thoughts and my emotions. And so there might be regulations that are seeming to infringe potentially on my body or my ability to manifest, you know, through fertility treatments and things like that. But you don't get to decide what goes on in here, lawmakers, right? Like I regulate my thoughts and my emotions. And you could even extend that to where I place my attention and my focus and creating that energy of the inner world. So knowing that there will be a way, you know, even when it looks like those perceived obstacles in the outside are, you know, it's just stopping in West Texas and looking around and being like, you know, it's the same exact thing, right? When you focus on that, you just got to keep going.
Well, and even just imagine, like, I think about this in the way of, like, if all of the women in the United States had that belief system, what would happen externally? Because, like we were talking about earlier, is, like, this belief of, or this knowing of, like, what happens for me internally is what then we experience externally. We've been so conditioned in the past, especially a few years since the beginning of the pandemic and since the recent political climate that we've had, especially in the United States, to buy into the fear narratives. But it's like, if every single woman in the United States had the belief that I regulate my own experience, we would see a completely different reality. So again, it's just an invitation.
Right. Oh, and you know, and it's like, it's when the fear, because it feels so like insurmountable. What I've almost been doing in my hypnosis is almost like taking the emblem of that regulation on a female body and just shrinking it down till it's just a little pea size that I squash in my fingers, you know, and then goodbye, you know, and just feeling the power in that and knowing that I am a creator, not only my thoughts and my emotions, but my babies, you know, like I am a creator. And so this thing that feels so big when, like you said, when you buy in that fear narrative, when you let the outside try to dictate what's going to happen, it's like, there's so many different ways, either by telling yourself like affirmations, but doing somatic work, the imagery that you can experience in hypnotherapy and things like that. There's so many ways to bring you back into your power, into your own regulation, right? And yeah, I hope anyone who's feeling that or notices themselves, it doesn't have to be related to IVF, but in any way where they feel like the outside fear of anything that might be going on, just tap into your own power and what you do regulate within yourself, because then that's when we start to see the external experience shift and change too.
Yes.
Kat, oh my goodness. I'm excited to go back and listen to all this. Thank you so much. Tell me and tell us, where can folks find what you're up to online and everything about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 best places to find me are over on Instagram, which is Cozadd Coaching, and I'm sure you'll put that in the show notes for
Absolutely.
the spelling. And other place that you can check out kind of what I have going on, I have a podcast called The No Bullshit Manifestation Show. We get no bullshitty over there. I don't deliver anything with any level of fluff, because my dream is to be able to help people understand this innate power that you have in the most like clear, concise way that I possibly can. So those are the 2 best places to find me.
Oh, absolutely. And her show's amazing. That's how I originally found you, Kat, and got to know you from that show. And what's fun is we're doing a swap. So I will be on her show. She is over here. And so if you guys enjoy either of our shows, you're in for a major treat coming up here. So, thank you so much, Kat. This was so much fun. I love geeking out with you on this stuff.
Yeah, this is great. I literally, we could go all day long, clearly.
We could. All right. Thank you, travelers, for joining us here today on this journey towards destination manifestation. I hope you learned something. I can't wait to hear about the money that you tune into, the money that you receive based on applying these principles we discussed here today. And so if you enjoyed this episode and you learned something interesting about the energetics of manifestation and money, be sure to share your key takeaways on social media. And if you do that, tag Kat and I in your posts. Okay. I absolutely love it. There's like nothing that makes me happier when I see you all taking selfies at the gym or on your walks, or like, sharing the show and saying like kind of what really resonated with you on Instagram stories or wherever it might be. I absolutely love it. So be sure to share what resonated with you so that you can learn even more about it. All music on this podcast is by A Cubed. And remember, what you believe, you receive. You're the best manifester in the entire world, whether you mean to or not. So now it's up to you to focus on what you want instead. I'll catch you next time.